Change hit in the air to deep right field. That goes to Lindy. And the save. He's done. Get out of here, baseball. It's gone. Oh, my God. Can you believe it? Johnny Bench has tied it up. The Cincinnati Reds win the World Series in 4 straight. It was a sweep. In the dirt. It's a wild pitch. Here comes Walker. The Reds win the pennant. Hawkins won the game. That ball is fair. Cincinnati's ahead. 2 games to none. Welcome, Joe Randa to Cincinnati. Adam Dunn has done it again. Benzinger backing and calling. And the 1990 World Championship belongs to the Cincinnati Reds.
Marty, yes. This is Adam from Milwaukee. Hey, Adam, how you doing? I'm good. How are you? Good. Do you think Scott Chatterbox is a good player?
Dunn up there with the bases loaded, the outfield deep and around toward right, and the 1-0 on the way to the plate. Swung on, long drive, right field, and this one belongs to the Reds.
And a high drive, hit back into deep right field. Junior has just knocked the door down to the 500 club.
Benson's first home run is a walk-off winner. That ball had a family.
And De La Cruz is, oh my goodness, look at this kid run. My, oh my, that is a triple.
Matt McClain's first big league bomb.
Spencer Steer's first big league hit is a home run to straightaway center field. Joey Votto's done it again.
The pitch. Votto swings high in the air. Right field. Yes! He pointed to the dugout to say, I told you. That is Joey Votto's 315th career go-ahead ribby. Only Johnny Bench had more as a Red.
And I can't tell you how much it means to play in front of everyone here in Cincinnati as a Red. What a gift. What a tremendous gift. So thank you. Thank you.
I think I can speak for all of Reds country. Joey Votto, thank you.
High drive. Left center field. Racing back to the line. Bourgeois. The Reds are National League Central Division champions. In the air, left center field. Did he? He did. He did. Reds win. Win. Line into right field. Genius, the first Red ever. With 4 home runs in a game. Can you believe it? In the air, down the right field line. Doesn't have a chance. The Reds have won on a 3-run home run on opening day by Ramon Hernandez. A strike away and out away is Homer Bailey. Ground ball to third. Frazier gloves. Throw to first, and Homer Bailey, for the second time in his major league career, has tossed a no-hitter. Oh, gosh. Oh, my God. Are you kidding me? Holy Moses, the second player in major league history to hit 7 home runs in the first 10 games. In the air, and the Reds win. What a dream beginning to the career of Jay Bruce.
MLB general managers converged on San Antonio this week, Nick, for the annual MLB GM meetings. Starting to get some rumblings out of those meetings about the Reds' plans for 2025. Hey, everybody, welcome in. Chatterbox Reds. I'm Craig Sandlin, joined, of course, by Reds guru Nick Kirby. Nick, happy November. A little bit gloomy here in Memphis over the last couple of days. How are things there in Northeast Ohio? How are we doing?
Doing good. Had a nice, it's about 17-hour trip down to Cincinnati to start the week off. Got to have a small part in broadcasting some college basketball games. So that was pretty cool. Now back to the grind here, and Reds news. It's really come fast and furious so far this offseason.
I know. I tell you what, even doing some preparation for the show today, even more news that I hadn't even seen and more speculation that I hadn't seen. And just a lot of stuff coming out of these meetings, and we'll discuss all of it, plus some news from around the league, not even just Red specific news that we're going to get into today and chat about how it might affect the Reds moving forward. But before we get into all that, Nick, we couldn't do a show like today without the support of Deep South Commodities.
Yeah, thanks as always to Deep South Commodities, DSC. They are a leader in renewable commodities for biofuel production, specializing in used cooking oil collection, aggregation, and sales. Visit www.deepsouthcommodities.com for more information. Thanks as always to John and his team over at DSC.
That's right. Thanks to DSC for their support. Nick, let's get into it. The biggest news of the day, seemingly a report from Jon Heyman this morning that Nick Martinez expected to accept Cincinnati's qualifying offer, signing a 1-year, $21 million contract. Officially, he has until November 19th to officially accept that offer, but rumors starting to speculate that he will, in fact, accept that offer. What's your initial reaction to hearing that Nick Martinez is expected to be back on the Cincinnati Reds in 2025 with a qualifying offer?
Well, I was surprised that this news broke so quickly. I thought with, having till the 19th, it would get dragged out, and it may officially get dragged out. But Jon Heyman, for some of his, arson judge flubs, has been pretty accurate when he's reported actual news like this. So if he says this, I think it's pretty concrete. I certainly buy it. And I think this is just honestly one of the most fair deals for both sides. Nick Martinez pitched his tail off last year, was making, I believe, $12 million. He gets a pay raise to 21. He's older. He's 34 years old. So it's hard to justify going too deep into a contract with him, which we'll discuss. Just seems like a very fair deal for both sides, and a deal that I don't think either side feels like they got a steal on, but also doesn't feel like they got shortchanged on either.
Yeah, and that's one, you mentioned it real quick, but the one thing here is that Jon Heyman doesn't necessarily mention where he's hearing these things. He doesn't mention if it's a source that specifically says that that's expected to move forward, or if that's just the rumblings around the meeting. Whatever it may be, Nick Martinez in 2024 was a huge piece of the Cincinnati Reds. 16 starts, 26 relief appearances, ended the season with a 3.10 ERA. At the end of the season, 11 starts, to finish the year, 2.42 ERA over that span, and really, in my opinion, at least solidified that he would in fact get this qualifying offer. I think if he kind of continued to go back and forth between the bullpen and starting, and maybe not had a clear role, maybe this doesn't happen. The other piece that we have to talk about, Nick, is the depth of the Reds starting pitching as it moves into 2025. And I think that this is a big piece of this conversation, is that we all know and expect that Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, Andrew Abbott were going to be part of the rotation in 2025. There were questions beyond that. I think that Rhett Lauder pitched his way into the starting rotation in 2025, but with Brandon Williamson and Julian Aguiar expected to miss all of 2025 with Tommy John surgery, it really put you in a situation where you're going to have to add starting pitching regardless. And quite frankly, you have a known commodity with Nick Martinez, who pitched really well in 2024 and really served as a team leader for this young Reds pitching staff. And Frankie Montas also did a little bit of that before the trade deadline. I think we're probably seeing a little bit of value here in terms of just the leadership of Nick Martinez beyond just his on-the-field performance as well.
Yeah, and I'd also add in Jacob Junis turning down his option as well. I mean, I said it last week, and I know a lot of people aren't going to agree with me. I think that the Reds need pitching more than they need position players right now. The Reds pitching was great in 2024, but there wasn't really a whole lot of underperformances with that. So in order to maintain that, you have to, I think, get better. The offense was not good, but they had a lot of guys that underperformed, and there's opportunities for that to bounce back just naturally. And you do have a little bit more depth there. Now, I'm not saying the Reds shouldn't add position players, because I clearly think they should, but I think that the pitching is more of an absolute necessity. right now, I mean, I'm looking at the FanGraphs projected rotation, and it's Hunter Green, Andrew Abbott, Nick Lodolo, and Graham Ashcraft. I don't want Graham Ashcraft starting, and so that's 4. Burns is not going to be ready on opening day. Connor Phillips, I'm not going to roll the dice on him. I'm not giving up on him by any means, but you have 4 starting pitchers right now that you feel good about, and that's if they're healthy. Always a big if they're healthy. So I still think the Reds need more starting pitching. I don't think Nick Martinez is the end of it. But the great thing about Nick Martinez, specifically for the Reds, is if you do get into a situation next year where you have Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, Rhett Lauder, Andrew Abbott, and Chase Burns all healthy and pitching well at the same time, you don't have to bump one of them down to AAA. You don't have to move one of them to the bullpen. You can easily move Nick Martinez to the bullpen and still have a very, very valuable pitcher as a reliever. So that's why I think Nick Martinez with a young staff makes more sense. He helps you being prepared for the inevitable injuries and maybe even underperformances like they could happen. Could Rhett Lauder regress? I don't think so, but it's possible. Could Andrew Abbott regress? Down the list, he helps prepare. He helps you be prepared, but also helps you have a really good starting pitching option when you're going to need that.
Yeah, absolutely. The question, of course, once the Reds extended this qualifying offer, Nick, was what's going to make more sense for Nick Martinez at this point? And the conversation was, okay, is he going to accept a 1-year, $21 million deal, which is probably above his AAV that he would expect on the free agent market? Or is he going to go out and test the waters and try and capitalize on the 2024 season that he had and lock in a multi-year deal? Scott Boras yesterday did share that he has started to receive multi-year contract offers. He was quoted as saying the pitching market, I think last year was more focused on the relief market. This year, it's very clear that it's very focused on starting. I think the starters will be going quite quickly. So from Nick Martinez's perspective, explain the decision to at least allegedly take the 1-year 21 versus going out and taking a multi-year deal.
Well, I mean, he's 34 years old. He hasn't been a established starting pitcher. So could Nick Martinez have probably gotten a 3-year deal? Yes. But Nick Martinez probably would be looking at a 3-year, $40 million deal. Maybe that's probably around the ballpark. So what you can do is you can say, all right, I can accept a 1-year, $21 million deal. And if I go out and I pitch well again, and I prove that, I wouldn't say a fluke, but prove that because he's been a good pitcher for multiple years. But if he proves that he can be a starting pitcher, he's going to get at least that again. And he already has that $20 million on top of it. So I think for Nick Martinez's perspective, it's a smart gamble. And it's not like even if he pitches poorly that he's still not going to get anything next year because we know how valuable starting pitchers are. And someone's going to look at Nick Martinez and be like, hey, that guy could bounce back. We'll give him $10 million. We'll give him, a Frankie Montas or whoever type deal. From the Reds' perspective, I don't think you want to sign a 34-year-old pitcher to a 3-year deal. I think you'd rather pay more up front. And I've said this many times, man, I sure as hell wish the Reds would have paid Jeimer Candelario an extra $5 million in 2024 and be done with that contract, right? I mean, that's how I view this. If you overpay in 1 year, okay, so what? It's a 1-year overpay. It's not going to hurt you year to year, and you're not stuck with bad contracts. So I just think this deal makes so much sense from really both sides' perspective. I wouldn't have been upset, though. Like, let me be clear. If Nick Martinez had declined the qualifying offer and the Reds got a nice draft pick, I would have been like, hey, that's a good deal too, because these draft picks are super valuable. So I only would have been upset if the Reds didn't offer him a qualifying offer. That would have really been the only way that I would have been upset here. And really, either way this would have gone, I would have been happy. But at least the Reds have this part figured out. The challenging thing would have been if the Reds had gone deep into free agency, which I think they would have, without getting any sort of starting pitcher. And then you're kind of in a panic mode at the end, which is possible. And a long-winded way of this here. look no further than the talk of the pitching market, Craig. Look at what happened in Boston. They had two players that could have gotten offered qualifying offers, Nick Pivetta and Tyler O'Neill. They offered Pivetta the qualifying offer. They didn't offer Tyler O'Neill. And I think a lot of people would say Tyler O'Neill's probably a better just player in terms of just, your overall MLB The Show ranking, right? If we're going that route. But the market is going to dictate that starting pitcher is going to be more of a premium. And that's why I think it makes the most sense here.
Yeah, it's interesting. Gordon Wittenmyer put out an article this morning talking a little bit about some of these things. He mentioned that the Reds kicked the tire on a 2-year deal with Martinez before extending that qualifying offer. The thing that you just mentioned, Nick Pivetta, and it kind of leads into the next conversation, is that Spotrac, which is a website that kind of does a lot of the free agent value conversations and stuff like that. So they had Nick Martinez projected at a market value, 2 years, $37.5 million contract, basically $18.5 million per year. They based that on the Seth Lugo contract, which was 3 years, 45, Chris Sale, 2 years, 38. So the Reds overpaying by maybe $2.5 million for a 1-year deal versus doing a multi-year deal does make sense. Nick Pivetta, on the other hand, to your point, his projected contract is $15.1 million per year. So the fact that Boston's willing to overpay for that just shows what the expected free agent market is going to be for the Reds this year. And it's interesting because Gordon Wittenmyer specifically mentioned a story about these GM meetings where one of the talks of the meetings were about specifically qualifying offers. And there were 13 players overall that received qualifying offers on Monday. And most of the talk, I guess, was around the surprise over the Reds extending Nick Martinez a qualifying offer along with Nick Pivetta. And Nick Krall was asked, quote, "Are you prepared for him to accept your offer?" And Nick Krall's response was, "It's kind of the starting pitching market, right?" So at this point, you have to make a decision. Would you rather kind of overpay a little bit for 1 year without as much risk, or go out and try and do a 2 or 3 year deal, or be stuck with doing a Frankie Montas type deal where you got $16 million a year after Tommy John, where he didn't pitch for a year? So there's a lot that goes into these types of things. And the next conversation really turns to, what does this mean overall for 2025? Because the Reds are expected to freeze their payroll at the 2024 level, which was bottom 6 in the MLB. So Nick, knowing the holes that the Reds still have in this lineup, if Nick Martinez does accept this qualifying offer, what do you think it signals, if anything, for the remainder of this free agency period for 2025?
I don't think it signals all that much because, again, unless you disagree with me that the Reds were fine not adding pitching, then they were going to have to add a pitcher. All right. And I mean, unless you want to do some bottom of the barrel, throw your hands up on the air, throw stuff on the wall and see if anything sticks. I mean, you're looking at paying 12, 13, 14 million either way. So it's a couple $1 million. That's not going to make or break the budget one way or the other. It's not like, well, this by you signing Nick Martinez instead of going out on the free agent market, the Reds now have money to go get Santander. Like, that changes absolutely nothing, in my opinion, there. If we're looking at the Reds' payrolls, probably around $60 million now with the addition of Nick Martinez. I think we're probably projecting it to be $110 million. I mean, there's still probably $50 million to play with. And the Reds also could get creative here as well. The Reds could look to move Jeimer Candelario, a deal where they eat some of that money. They could look to move Pagan and eat some of that money. They could also look to move Jonathan India and have some of that money. They could non-tender Santiago Espinal, which MLB trade rumors projected. I think that would be insanity, in my opinion. But there's other ways to even cut that payroll down a little bit. So I don't think it changes all that much. And one other point that you also have to consider here is when you go out and you sign another pitcher, you almost always have to add on an option that has a buyout, right? So there's no buyout with the qualifying offer. There's no option for the next year. So if you go out and you sign a free agent pitcher to a 1-year, $14 million deal, you probably also have to guarantee them at least $2 million more in a buyout for 2026. And that's just additional money that kind of, so there's a lot of ways that this comes back to the Reds, and the it's like you get your save. It's almost like a rebate type thing where you're getting that $2 million back next year that you didn't have to spend this year.
Yeah. And, of all the free agent starting pitchers on the market, Nick Martinez had the 7th highest WAR in 2024, a 4.9. 2 others above him received qualifying offers as well. Max Fried from Atlanta at 5.2, and Corbin Burns, who you mentioned earlier, 7.2 WAR, both received a qualifying offer. Blake Snell, Yusei Kikuchi, Nathan Eovaldi, and Jack Flaherty did not receive qualifying offers. All had WARs above Nick Martinez's 4.9. But Nick, when you look at this, and we mentioned it before, the realistic story here is that the Reds still need to add starting pitching to this rotation, most likely. As you look up and down the free agent list, is there a name that sticks out to you as someone that might make sense for the Reds, given the budget and given kind of the expectation that this may be a depth piece more than anything else?
I think if you're in the red spot, I think this gives you the flexibility now to sit back and wait and see. I think now you can kind of try to find a player that I don't want to say falls to you, because I don't think they need to add a bad player, but I think it gives you the opportunity to find a pitcher that markets fall. And I see right in the chat, perfect example would be Walker Buehler. If Walker Buehler, the market just isn't there for him, he wants to go on a 1-year prove it deal. Says, hey, I'll take a shot with my hometown team. I think he would fit. But I don't think you're in a position now where you need to force a starting pitcher. And I also think you could even add a couple of the throw stuff on the wall now and see what happens. You might remember the Reds tried with Luke Weaver. Didn't work, but I think now you kind of, after seeing him pitch in the playoffs, go, okay, well, there was something there, and it makes us feel like it was worth more of a chance. It didn't work out for the Reds, worked out great for the Yankees in a different type of role. But I think you could add a couple of those type of guys now. I would still like to see them add someone a little bit more proven. I would honestly, Jacob Junis, I'd love to find a way to get him back. I think he would make a lot of sense to me. And you just kind of have to look up and down. But one thing I probably want to avoid is, I don't know if I really want to add a starting pitcher that has the qualifying offers. I don't really want the Reds giving up draft picks, because it's almost like you're making a trade. In a way, you're trading away a draft pick to pick up one of these pitchers on a qualifying offer. So I think guys like Buehler, guys like Junis, that's probably about where I would think the Reds should look at.
And an important part of this was also mentioned in the Gordon Wittenmyer article that I want to kind of wrap up our conversation around Nick Martinez with. And that was a quote regarding a mutual interest to keep Martinez in Cincinnati. Obviously, Cincinnati wants to keep Martinez on the Reds. They showed that by extending a qualifying offer. But when Nick Martinez was asked about it, he said, quote, "I'm getting older and it's kind of time to maximize. And I want to win. That's a high priority to me, to win a championship. Cincinnati, especially hiring Terry, I think there's a great chance." So, Nick, we talked about it when the Reds hired Terry Francona. Nick Martinez is echoing the sentiments right now. Terry Francona gives this Reds ball club almost a level of legitimacy. Even if the budget does stay at $100 to $110 million, the free agents may still want to come here with that budget because they believe in Terry and what he's able to do, not to mention the potential for trades that we know that Terry Francona is high on. So as we wrap up the conversation around Nick Martinez, just what's your thoughts around Terry and how he plays a role in all of these conversations that we're having today?
It helps some. I mean, I still, you don't want to go too far with that, because guys are also going to go places where they know they can get playing time. And if you're going into a situation where, hey, I'm 7th on the Reds starting pitching depth chart going into the season, versus I can go to the Miami Marlins and be guaranteed a starting pitching spot on a minor league contract. I know that I'm signing a minor league contract with the Marlins, but I know they're going to pick me up, right? I know they'll pick me up. You can't go too far, and the same thing with position players. So, I mean, most of the time, guys are looking out for themselves, but I mean, you might be able to find a couple of those veteran type guys that, hey, I won a situation like Cincinnati. I think, to be honest, I love Terry Francona. I've raved about him. I think a lot of players are going to want to play with Ellie De La Cruz more than Terry Francona, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Nick, we've got more news to get into, including more Reds trade talks and some other news from around the league. But first, I want to pause and take a second to acknowledge our other presenting sponsor.
Yeah, as always, we want to remind you that you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is always available for anything related to mental health, whether it's an immediate crisis, simply wanting to find out how to connect with care, or anything in between. It's a 100% confidential, secured, anonymous way to reach out for help when you don't know where else to turn. To connect, call or text 98 or visit mantherapy.org to get help. It's okay not to be okay.
All right, Nick, we're going to pause on Reds talk for just a minute. How we talked a lot about the Reds budget for 2025 and the impact of the Diamond bankruptcy going on. But some other interesting news coming out of these general manager meetings and just around the league. The St. Louis Cardinals today announced some interesting information. They are going back to the FanDuel Sports Network, tweeting out that they, quote, have reached a new multi-year digital rights agreement with FanDuel, which for the first time will include a direct-to-consumer streaming option for fans with extensive Cardinals TV territory. So I think this is big news and something that we've talked about for sure about, one of the positive potential outcomes of the Bally Sports ongoing litigation is about potential for these direct-to-consumer streaming options. We're now seeing it with the St. Louis Cardinals. First and foremost, just your reaction to the Cardinals moving on to the FanDuel Sports Network, and then we'll go on with conversation around the direct-to-consumer options as well.
Well, a lot of layers with the Cardinals because they had already said that they were planning on cutting payroll. I'm assuming this doesn't make them change course because it kind of felt like they were kind of in a spot where they kind of needed to retool anyways, in a ways. So that's a interesting layer to this. I would have to think if the Cardinals, and I saw the Marlins also are likely to get done, I'd have to think if the Cardinals are getting done, that FanDuel's going to be interested in wanting the not FanDuel. FanDuel's just the name. FanDuel doesn't own any of this. They're just the advertiser on the name. It's the Diamond Sports Group. But I would have to think Diamond's got to be interested in the Reds. Reds always have some of the highest TV ratings of any team. The Reds have a very exciting team with Ellie De La Cruz on it that's going to get eyeballs. I would have to think if they're getting some teams, I would have to think at this point they're going to get the Reds, although this saga has been something new every day with it. When you think something's going one way, it goes the other. So I don't know. We'll wait and see. The direct-to-consumer is great for those in market. I don't think it's the best. I still wish there was a way that they could just get them on MLB TV, and then people can buy the whole MLB TV package and then have it. Instead, you're going to have to use the FanDuel Sports Network app to use it, which I know a lot of people complained about because last year you could use that. I'm assuming they're using the same app they used for the Bally Sports Ohio last year. But I know there's a lot of people who used that app that had a cable login, but they would use that app on the go because you could log in with your cable and watch. That was the only way you could use it. And there was always a lot of complaints about it. So it's not obviously going to be as as comprehensive and as work as well as the MLB app, because it's, designed for users all across. It's one of the best apps probably out there. So it's not perfect, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. And if the Reds are able to do it, I have to think they're going to get more money, albeit less than they were getting. I don't think they're going to get more money than what they would get from MLB.
Yeah, and Evan Drellich, who is a senior writer for The Athletic, reported earlier this week that the objection deadline in the Diamond Sports Group bankruptcy case has been pushed to Thursday, meaning today. So there may be news coming out, more of this coming out in the next couple hours or a couple days. The MLB and Diamond have reportedly been negotiating the TV fate of 6 teams, that number probably down to 5. Atlanta, Miami, and St. Louis all seem to be returning to Diamond Sports Group. The unclear teams remaining: Cincinnati, Detroit, Kansas City, the Los Angeles Angels, and the Tampa Bay Rays now remain as the unclear teams on that. So, right now there's a lot of unknowns in terms of what the future holds for the Cincinnati Reds on TV. Goal obviously being to work something out with Diamond Sports, and whether that's a direct-to-consumer option or otherwise is yet to be seen. Nick, any final thoughts on Diamond Sports before we jump back into Cincinnati Reds talk specifically?
No, just be fascinated to watch how this plays out. I would think it would give the Reds a little bit more money next year, but I don't think it's going to necessarily make a 110 payroll jump up to 160. I think maybe it takes a 110 jump up to 120 or 130. I mean, I think that's probably my best guess what we're looking at here.
Yeah, and worth noting, as of right now, at least reports are that Nick Krall does not have a 2025 budget finalized. Still waiting on more information before that gets finalized. This may be one of those things that plays into it. That tidbit coming from another Gordon Wittenmyer article today regarding rumors floating around the GM meetings around potential trades. And one of the comments that stood out to me, Nick, obviously, as we talk about 2025 and what this looks like in the near future, is when Nick Krall was specifically asked about the options of 2025 and specifically Jonathan India. He said, quote, "I would not rule anything out. That doesn't mean that the Reds have specific plans to try to move him or even view the middle infield crop as a surplus. But, quote, walking into this season, we thought we had an infield surplus, but we didn't have enough," Krall said a few weeks ago. Nick, this seems like an ongoing story with the Cincinnati Reds at this point, that Jonathan India is on the trade block. It happened last offseason, reportedly potentially on the trade block at the trade deadline this past season. Obviously now, again, nothing being ruled out. Let's just start with this simple question. If you're in Nick Krall's shoes, what does the future for Jonathan India look like?
I'm not in a rush to trade him. I mean, he was one of 3 players that was an above average hitter for the Reds last year. So I'm certainly not in a rush. Now, am I against trading him? No. I mean, I'm not really against trading anyone not named Ellie De La Cruz. I mean, for the right deal. I mean, you can convince me to move. I mean, I'd say Ellie and Hunter Green are about the 2 players that are as close to untouchable as it is. Other than that, I mean, I could always be convinced of some sort of trade for someone if it's enough. But I'm not moving India just to move him. I like the idea of India playing first base / DH and kind of being a backup second baseman. I think that there could be a lot of value in that. I really believe in Christian Encarnacion Strand. And you also do have Jeimer Candelario as well, but I'm not in a rush to move Jonathan India. I don't understand really the sentiment of those who are. I mean, this is a guy that had the best on base percentage on the team by quite a wide margin last year. So if you move him, you better then you really have to improve this offense, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, the attractive part, obviously, for other teams about Jonathan India is that he's under contract for this year at $5 million. He's got another year of arbitration eligibility after that. And so you've got 2 years of control of a player who, again, whether Cincinnati Reds fans want to acknowledge it or not, was a decent baseball player in 2024, both offensively and defensively. Significantly improved. It felt like defensively. I know his range is still a question and a number of other things, but one of the questions has to be, okay, you've got a young, potentially starting second baseman. You've got an affordable contract for sure, but with the volatility of the market and the number that's being thrown out there right now is that there's as many of half the teams in baseball that still don't know what their payroll is going to be due to broadcast revenue cuts, what the return could be for a guy like Jonathan India, and whether or not it makes sense then to move on. And for you, is there, I know it's hard to put like names and everything to this, but like, is there a type of package that makes sense that you would jump on to move a guy like Jonathan India? Or is it, we're gonna basically sit pat, and unless someone blows us away, we're good?
I mean, the only like major league package that I would think would make sense would be a team that has some sort of pitcher. I don't really see a position player for position player type swap. It just seems like that's going to be hard. It seems like it would either be a pitcher or you'd be looking at lower level prospects, because you just have to think that a team trying to acquire Jonathan India is in a win now mode. Like, Jonathan India is not a guy that you're trying to get for the future. You're trying to get him for the next 2 years to help you, really fill a spot. So I don't know. I would be shocked if anything this offseason. I do think the Reds are going to make some trades. I think the Reds are going to be very active on the trade market. But again, when you look at like a guy like Tyler O'Neill not getting a qualifying offer, how much value is there in with position players? I don't think you're going to get enough back to justify moving a guy that led your team in on base percentage, that was a decently above average hitter and one of your 3 good hitters last year. I don't think you're getting enough back. I think you just write it out. And I do like that Jonathan India has been willing to be flexible with moving positions. So again, I just don't think it makes sense, but I wouldn't rule anything out.
And one of the kind of compounding factors here in terms of these conversations is Matt McLain. And Matt McLain spent some time this fall in the outfield. He's on the record of saying that he likes shortstop and second base, though. In general, there is a kind of a bevy of middle infielders that this Reds minor leagues and major league roster have potentially at their disposal. The problem is obviously who's going to be healthy, who's going to step up to the plate and actually perform at a major league level. Let's start with Matt McLain, though. Misses all of 2024, missed part of 2023. At least for me personally, and I think we're on the same page here, but it's really hard to rely on Matt McLain being your everyday second baseman going into 2025, right?
Yeah, it's hard to rely, but man, it sure makes your team a lot better if he is. So, so it makes it so tough about this offseason, because it's not, you don't have to flinch. If Matt McLain is healthy, he's a really good second baseman, fits a need for your team, improves your defense, is a perfect double play combo with Ellie De La Cruz. The list goes on, but you also just can't bank on him. And I've seen this notion that, well, Matt McLain's not injury prone. I mean, 3 straight years he's had a pretty significant injury that's taken him out for about at least 2 months. So I don't think you can bank on him. That's why I think Santiago Espinal, it's pretty important that you keep him, just because I would really like just to have a backup defensive player that I feel is above average. And I know Espinal's official numbers didn't look great, but again, I go more the 3-year sample on these players defensively. I just think you can have a lot of fluky things in 1 year. with a lot of these defensive metrics, especially for players that move positions like Espinal did. So again, I think McLean is the kind of player though that you roll the dice on, and you have to roll. The Reds have to roll the dice somewhere, position player wise. I think Matt McLean is the one guy that you roll the dice and you hope and pray that he can stay healthy most of the year.
Another guy that's playing into this conversation is Edwin Arroyo, Nick. Edwin Arroyo is playing in the Arizona Fall League this year. He's a priority shortstop. He's only playing shortstop in fall ball. Obviously, there's been a lot of conversation around Elly De La Cruz, but if we're being honest, the conversation becomes, Edwin Arroyo and second base, or what the middle infield looks like long term. How do you see this playing out over the next 1 to 3 years?
Edwin Arroyo is probably the only player that I've seen in this organization that makes me okay with the idea of moving Elly to third base, but I'm not messing with Elly for the hell of it. So I've got to be pretty sure that Edwin Arroyo can hit at a decent enough MLB level. And I think there's a real potential for him to get there, but I'm going to need more. I see a situation where Edwin Arroyo comes up and he probably has to be the second base, third base, backup shortstop at the Santiago Espinal. And then maybe eventually you get to an offseason where you feel confident enough in Arroyo and you move Elly at that point. I don't think you're moving him in the middle of the year or anything. I think it's all right, we're going to move him then. But again, Elly De La Cruz, you also got to be mindful with Elly. He's not going to want to move off shortstop. He's going to be a free agent. He wants to be a free agent shortstop. So you have to weigh all of that and your ability to extend Elly or whatever into all that. But again, Edwin Arroyo, the biggest thing is, can he hit? That's what you have to figure out first. A lot of really good signs we're seeing with him and spring training and the Arizona Fall League. You couple both of those together, it's a pretty nice start. But let's see what he does in AAA next year. Over, I think, a pretty extended period. I think we'll get a better idea of really where he's at when we see him kind of go through, the highs and lows of a baseball season.
Last topic, Nick, I want to touch on real quick for today, at least, is the conversation around spring training. And I know we're in November and we're 3 months away from pitchers and catchers reporting. But Nick Kroll emphasized that most players on the roster will go to spring training tasked with earning big league jobs, regardless of this year's status, with many in play for moving around the field defensively. Nick, as you look forward to February of 2025 and spring training, what's your number one storyline that you're watching for the Cincinnati Reds ball club?
My number one storyline when we get to spring training?
Sure.
Oh, that's a good question, Craig.
We're only 3 months away, Nick. Surely you're already looking ahead, right?
I mean,
I can start. I think the question is CES, right? So for me, the storyline that I'm watching is can CES step up? Is he healthy? Can he be an everyday first baseman? Do they try him out at third base? Do they move him around and see what he can do? Offensively, he can provide a bat and a power at bat that this Reds team desperately needed in 2024. And so if CES is healthy and can perform at the level that we expect him to be, or want him to be, I guess maybe is the better way to put it, he's the storyline that I'm watching, is how can he progress and come back from the injury that he faced. But there's a lot of similar stories around this Reds team, and guys coming back from injury or guys that underperformed in 2024. So, for me personally, I think CES has the opportunity to make the biggest impact, and a lot of it will really reveal itself in spring training. Unfortunately, the Arizona Fall League, he had a little bit of a setback, didn't play as much or hasn't played as much as we would have liked him to play. And so spring training is going to be big for him, quite frankly, in my opinion. He's a guy at risk at starting in AAA if he doesn't perform in spring training at the level that we would hope.
All right, I think I got my sea legs here now, Craig. So
all right, I'm
gonna start with a little bit. I agree completely with CES. I think he's one of the biggest keys to this team. I believe in him. McLean and CES are the two players I'm rolling the dice on, and I'm saying put them on the opening day roster and see what happens. I don't mess with that unless CES gets to camp and looks awful, but I can't ever imagine CES having a bad spring training. Like, the guy rolls out of bed and he can hit in those kind of environments. So I'm putting him on the opening day roster. I don't give a damn. I think people make way too big of a deal of his 29 games last year. 29 games. I don't know how many times I can say that. I'm going to do one small.
How many games
29.
did he play?
He only played 29 games, and half of them he was hurt. People make it such a big deal about 29 games. So overblown. I'm over it. Graham Ashcraft is a big storyline. Is he in the bullpen? That's something I'm watching. Is he traded? I think he also could get traded this offseason. I think he's one of the higher, when I did a list of players, I think it were possible to be traded. Ashcraft to the top of the list. I think, is he in the bullpen? That's a big storyline. But my biggest storyline, Craig, is these fringe players. Who steps up? The Reds have a lot of these players with some potential that are on the 40-man roster, but they're hard to really put a whole lot of faith in. Can any of these guys stand up? And I'm talking about Joey Wiemer. I'm talking about Reese Hines. I'm talking about Jacob Hurtubise. I'm talking about Blake Dunn. Those guys. Can any of those guys, and I guess Will Benson has now pushed himself back into that camp. Can any of those guys have a great offseason, come to camp, give you some optimism that they can be a big league player, even a big league platoon player? Can Blake Dunn replace Stuart Fairchild? Can Will Benson get back to what he was? Can Joey Wiemer get to close to what the top draft pick he was? That's probably the biggest storyline to me, is can any of those guys kind of separate themselves from where they're at, where they're all kind of in this, yeah, we kind of like them, but there's not really any reason to be super hopeful about them. Can any of them get to the hopeful column?
I like it. Any final thoughts as we wrap up Chatterbox Reds for today?
No, just exciting. The off season is here, so the next thing is the qualifying offer, which we aren't going to really have anything. So really, we don't have a whole lot until the winter meetings is really the next time, which is, I'm trying to pull it up here. When is that? The December 2nd, I think it is. I could be wrong, but really until then, that's really when we're going to have the next, and it's going to be a pretty busy week with the draft lottery. I'm fascinated to see that. The Rule 5 draft, I really think there's a possibility that the Reds are active on the Rule 5 draft. If there's a catcher available, I could really see the Reds looking to add someone there. So, yeah, I think it'll probably be quiet for a couple weeks and then really pick up and ramp up. But as always, we shall see.
Yep, some key dates from this offseason. November 19th, officially deadline day. That's the deadline to accept qualifying offers and for Rule 5 draft protection.
Oh, yeah, that's the other. That's the other big one that we're going to have to. And sorry to interrupt you, Craig. When we get a little closer to November 19th, I was kind of waiting to see if we got any clues. But we'll do a show where we're talking about all the players that are in that status of should they be Rule 5 projected or not, and try to give some predictions and some analysis on that.
Yep. And then November 22nd, the non-tender deadline. Winter meetings this year, December 9th through the 12th. Rule 5 draft is on the 11th. Amateur draft lottery on the 10th of December. And then spring training games begin February 20th. As always, Nick and myself, along with our host of Chatterbox Reds talent, will be live with any breaking news as it happens. Chatterbox Bengals will be live tonight from Champions Grill on Work Road at 7 p.m., leading up to Bengals versus Ravens on Thursday Night Football. Jacob Tissett will be live throughout the game tonight for a live watch-along and reaction. I will join him post-game for Chatterbox Bengals post-game show. You can either join us tonight after the game or download that wherever you get your podcasts in the morning. Off the Bench airs Monday through Friday, 10 a to 12 p. And don't forget to join Tom Brenneman with Dialed In Mondays at 9 a.m. and Thursdays at noon. As always, for Nicholas Kirby, I am Craig Sandlin. This has been Chatterbox Reds. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.